Welcome to Liberal Banter with Liz and Olu. Today we're going to talk about Trump's New York criminal trial and the coverage surrounding Stormy Daniels' testimony this week. We're also going to discuss the fact that Republicans are actually still having primaries, if you didn't know, and that a sizable minority of Republicans are continuing to protest vote for Nikki Haley, even though she dropped out. Third, we're going to talk about Vivek Ramaswamy's interview with Ann Coulter and what looks like a trip to the sunken place for him. And lastly, we want to talk about Anne Hathaway and her new movie, The Idea of You, and also an old movie of hers that we think not a lot of people on the internet are aware of. So let's get started with our first topic, Trump and his trial, and this week's very interesting, let's say, Stormy Daniels' testimony and the coverage of that in the media.
Yeah, so Trump's New York criminal trial about falsifying business records keeps going on. And I know that that's a mouthful and hard for people to say. So media keeps referring to it as the hush money trial or the Stormy Daniels trial, which is really a mischaracterization of what's going on. What he's actually been accused of is fraud and falsifying business records and possible, tax fraud. But I guess that's boring. So we have to focus on Stormy Daniels.
Yeah. I really have been trying not to follow this case because just for my own well-being, I don't need all these details. But even I couldn't escape some of the coverage. Like yesterday on SNL, they talked about this on Weekend Update, and apparently Stormy Daniels sharing that Trump didn't wear a condom. This is not information I need to know, and the media some of them are not doing a great job of covering this in a reasonable way. They've hyped this up so much. They're constantly talking about it. And now people are just losing interest, I think.
Absolutely. I don't understand why. I get that sex sells, so maybe, but once in a while, I wish our news media would pretend that they're actually about news and not about selling, advertisement and clicks, because there's just no reason. There is so much that we now know about Mr. Trump's genitalia that I just really wish I did not know. And as you said, it's inescapable. You can't turn it off unless you turn off the news completely.
Yeah, or the internet. And I think I understand what the prosecution is doing is trying to prove beyond doubt that Stormy Daniels did have this interaction with with President Trump, and that it was something that he was worried about during the election time of 2016. I think I understand that. That's why. So he continues to deny that he ever had this encounter. I don't know who he thinks he's fooling. Even Republicans don't believe that he didn't have this, moment with Stormy Daniels. Nobody believes him, but he's still lying about it, still pretending he doesn't know who she is. And so the prosecution continues to push all this extra detail to show that she's not lying. They did have this interaction. I understand that. That seems to me like details of the trial. The coverage of it is where I'm really struggling. It's so much unnecessary information. I don't know if you've had time to look at like the CNNs of the world. They have this ticker on the left side, kind of like something you would see on SportsCenter or something, where it's like minute by minute updates of what's going on in the courthouse. Like there's no other news happening anywhere else in the world. It's wild. It's really wild.
I disagree with you that the prosecution needed to do this. This case is not about litigating Trump's, I'm sure, various disgusting, ethically questionable, and possibly illegal sexual encounters. this case is about the money. And I get you have to prove that, he had a sexual encounter with Ms. Daniels, but I think all that is needed there is her confirming that it happened, and maybe, putting contemporaneous people who can say she told us that this happened. I do not agree that the level of, sort of pornographic detail that we've been given is necessary. I don't think the jury needs to hear any of this to make a determination on whether Trump would have wanted to pay her for this.
Well, if he would stop denying it, I think they would move on. And to be fair to the prosecution, they actually have moved on, right? I think the judge interrupted them a couple of times. I saw some coverage of that saying, we don't need all of that information. And so they have, they are focusing on the mechanics of the case and what is actually at stake, which is what happened afterwards, like the payoff or whatever, and who paid for what and what it was recorded as in the accounting documentation. So they are moving past it. It's a moment in America that we did not need, brought to us courtesy of just another piece of fallout, let's say, from the 2016 election. Like every few months you find out something else and you're like, man, if we had done things a little bit different in 2016, none of this would be happening right now. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah. And, to be clear, these are adults. They can have a sexual encounter if they want to. There's really no need to try to shame Mr. Trump or Daniels for having a sexual encounter. Yeah, sure, his wife was pregnant or whatever, but who cares? That's his personal life. That's between him and Melania Trump. If we're trying to build a sort of sex positive environment where, we want everybody to feel like a human being, I feel like a lot of it is also sort of salacious exploitation of Stormy Daniels, or it's like, oh, this is what this pornographic actress said about all of this stuff. I just don't think this is helping anybody in terms of our relations with sex. Sex is sex. It's adults have it. Newsflash. Now,
well, I don't think that's the point, though. I really think the point of prosecution asking these questions is to show that she's not making it up because the defendant keeps denying it.
I understand that that's the prosecution's thing, but the media's recounting of it is more about the salaciousness of it. Like, the titillation and the gossip part of this. I don't see how this is necessary at all. We don't need to know any of this stuff. Trump already has a lot of Me Too, actual sexual assault, actual rape accusations against him. And if we want to talk about that, we should talk about that in a sober and reflective way, and not this sort of clear, just sexploitation way of doing things that our cable news media are doing right now.
Yeah. I think people online, at least that I've seen, are really fed up with the media. I hate to use the term mainstream media, but it's not even just things like, properties like CNN or something. I see so many people frustrated with the New York Times. Right? Have you heard of that New York Times PitchBot account that just, it creates fake headlines because of how the New York Times has started covering politics in the US.
Yeah.
And sometimes the New York Times actually creates headlines that are basically look like the PitchBot created them. And I think people are done kind of with media in general. It's not a right or left issue at this point. It's more Americans are tired of how the news is managed and run and presented. And so they turn to people online, they turn to TikTok, they turn to, dare I say it, podcasts like ours. And I don't blame them, because if you spend time watching regular news, you're going to get very frustrated very quickly. But let's talk about some other news that happened this week, which shocked me, quite honestly, because I was minding my business on Threads, looking at people's tweets on things, or let's call it threads on things, not tweets. And I saw a headline that Nikki Haley won 22% of the vote in the Indiana GOP primary. And my first thought was, we're still having primaries? What? Isn't the race over for a GOP nominee? It is, but the primaries are still happening, guys. So FYI, if you still are in a state that hasn't had a primary yet, there is going to be one, regardless of the fact that we know who the nominees are on both sides. But for the Republicans, there's still going to be a primary. What do you make of this fact? 22% is obviously not enough to win, but it feels like a lot of people who are still taking time out of their day to show that they don't like Trump. A lot of Republicans who are taking time out of their day.
Exactly. That is 1 out of 5 people who voted in the GOP primary voted for Nikki Haley. Now,
and before you go on, I wanna say, like, the total number of voters, for people who don't know, and you may think this is not really a small number, it was around 590,000 votes were cast in this primary. So it wasn't a small primary. And 128,000 of those people voted for Nikki Haley, so 22%. But sorry, yeah, go on.
But Indiana does have an open primary, so anyone who is registered as a voter can vote whether they're Democratic or Republican.
Yeah.
But I think this is more of a problem for Trump than Vermont would have been, for example, because let's face it, like, nobody really thinks that Indiana is a Democratic paradise. Nobody really thinks that they're, like, a bunch of Democrats.
Wait, sorry, did you say this is more of a problem for Trump than Vermont?
Yeah, so in Vermont, Nikki Haley won the Republican primary.
Oh, okay. Vermont, I was like, was there a Vermont primary? I see. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Vermont is the only state that has the distinct honor of being the only ones who did not vote for Trump in the Republican primary. So shout out to Vermont.
Hold on. Wait, that's great. Amazing work, Vermont. Let's give Vermont a small round of applause. Let's do that.
Yes.
Congratulations to Vermont.
Congratulations,
sorry, please go on.
But Indeed, it is Vermont. Nobody expects a Republican to win the presidential election in Vermont. So, Vermont is part of the East Coast commie liberal things. MAGA doesn't care about Vermont. So that's fine.
They don't. No.
From Trump's perspective. I think this Indiana one is a real problem because Indiana is deeply red, I think Nikki Haley getting 1 out of 5 of the Republican votes in the Republican primaries, that seems to me like it's going to be a major problem for Trump in the general election.
You really think so?
Like, I don't know. It seems to me like there are people who feel strongly enough to still be protesting him now, even when it doesn't really matter.
Well, I see, like you said, it's an open primary, so some of those people might not even be Republican voters in the election, the general election in November. So there's that option. There's also, I guess, let me ask, are you saying is it a concern in the sense that you think he might lose a state like Indiana or Indiana itself, or in the sense that it will give him issues in the overall election, right? How are you viewing this? Do you think it's like a turnout thing where people are just going to stay home, or are you saying they will actually vote for the other candidate in the election? Biden?
I guess that is hard to predict, but it suggests to me that there's a minority of Republican holdouts who may or may not I don't think they're going to vote for Biden. I think that that's going to be a bigger leap, but they might consider other ways of protesting him, like writing in a third candidate, um, or not showing up at all, which could be a problem for him.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know. I don't know if I agree with this. The reason I don't know. I'm not agreeing necessarily is because I do think that Republican voters can grit their teeth, hold their nose, and vote for whoever has an R next to their name. They did that in 2016. They did it in 2020, and they'll probably do it again. So it may be, the way Democrats were voting uncommitted in the primary to express their dislike of Biden's policies.
yeah.
It may be a case like that where people are just doing that in the primary because they can, but then in the general, they show up and vote for their guy. I don't know if that's I don't know if I would read a lot into this, I guess is my point. I'm going to disagree with you on whether it's a problem or not. I think it seems like it is, but I also have just a long memory of Republicans saying all types of things in the primary election, and then on election day they came out and they did what they needed to do because of one issue like abortion or, taxes or whatever.
You know, I see what you mean in that at the end of the day, both sides, both voters don't really deviate much from the person that their party is actually putting forward. Um, and I see that, those voters in Indiana probably understood that it doesn't matter. So they felt more comfortable um, protesting against him. And maybe when it's actually the general election, they would just toe the party line. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but what I do find interesting is that a day after that, or 2 days after the Indiana primary, there was news that Nikki Haley has been courted by the Trump campaign um, for consideration for VP.
Stop. We didn't include her in our brackets last week.
We
Oh,
did not,
darn
because we
it.
thought that she was completely out of the running.
Oh my gosh. Do you think
Uh,
she'll actually take it on? If she does, that is just, oh my God. I hope she doesn't. But, these Republicans, man, they say one thing and then 2 months later, if it suits their political careers, you know,
you
they
know,
say another.
exactly. They're just craven, ambitious people. And Nikki Haley is notable for being, a serious flip flopper. And she is still trying to have it both ways. Today, saying that Biden is worse for democracy than Trump, which is just patently untrue on its surface. There's really no need to even try to debunk that. Um, but this report that Nikki Haley was being courted for VP came from Axios, which is a news outlet. And
Hold
then
on.
Trump,
I'm gonna look it up because I feel that sounds. Hold on. I see Axios here, and they have a story.
yes.
Oh, it says okay, but it says Donald Trump update. Trump nixes Haley for VP.
Right. So
So
he went on
okay.
his Truth Social and said that she was not at all under um, consideration. But that's Trump. I don't think anybody Trump is not a reliable source on Trump. So whatever. I really don't think I don't think that he is one to really quote on this. Um what I find interesting is that Trump's spokesman, Brian Hughes, that's the person who is actually a spokesman for the campaign, did not say yes or no. He just said that, Trump will select a running mate that the country can get behind on his own time. Um, so I find that to be more interesting than whatever, brain fart Trump is having on Truth Social.
Yeah, but sure. But I'm gonna go with that's not gonna happen. I think Nikki Haley, if she's smart, and I think she is, I don't agree with her on a lot, but I do think she's probably made the calculation that Trump this is probably going to be his last stab at being in office. And after this, like, I think Republican politicians should really think about post 2024. After this election, polls are polls and we'll see who wins. But after this election, Trump, win or lose, is probably going to be out of politics. So what is their plan long term? And someone like Nikki Haley might be in a good position as long as she doesn't go too far. And I mean good position to win a general election as long as she doesn't go too far into the Trump world mania in this election, unlike, people like Ron DeSantis. So we'll see how it goes. But I really hope she is staying away, far, far away from this campaign. It looks like a train wreck externally, but we wish her the best. But let's talk about someone who did not stay away from the campaign and, in fact, has hugged it so close that now they were on our Veep bracket for VP, although we got rid of them pretty early. So Vivek Ramaswamy did an interview with Ann Coulter this week that I think a lot of the internet saw. And I think it was the introduction, right, where she sort of talked about him and then said, he's very articulate. And then she kind of made a little side jab by saying that that's something you can't call. What is the term she used? American blacks or something? Which
African Americans or something. I'm not sure what.
I think she called it American blacks, and I just thought, like, what is that, like a paint color? Like, what is she saying? But she said he's very articulate, unlike American blacks, and then she went on to say she wouldn't be voting for him because he's Indian and she has some waspy, inclinations, being a wasp herself, which was just stunning, honestly. I don't think I can understate his face when she said this.
She put him so far down the sunken place. Like, he's like beneath so much loss of dignity, so much loss of pride, so much loss of personhood. She dehumanized him to his face, and
boldly,
and he had to grin through it, and then you could see his grin faltering as it went on, and you could just see him dying inside. And then she like weaponized anti-blackness and like jujitsu'd it into anti-Indian racism. I was just like, honestly, I have to say I was a little bit impressed because I was like, wow, this lady is she
I don't. What's really interesting to me is, as an immigrant myself, and I know Vivek is not an immigrant because he was born here, his parents are, but I think about the man is accomplished. I don't like him. He's a troll. He has embraced so much of what is wrong with American politics, all for clout, basically. But he is, like, objectively someone who has had some success in business as a business person, and has done some interesting things and achieved some things. And it wasn't, I didn't want to say sad because he put himself in this position. Like, how bad for him can we really feel? But it was so embarrassing, and I cringed for him as someone who has a similar background, like, coming from struggling, working your way up through the US system and trying to make something for yourself. He has done that. And it's so ridiculous to hear her talk about him that way. And then for him to sit there and take it because he put himself in that position. That's wild.
Exactly. And this is the thing. This is the problem. Trying to get the approval of these WASPs, right? Because she says flat out to him, it sounds like white nationalism. She says, and I quote, "There is a core national identity that is the identity of the WASP," right? And that doesn't mean we can take anyone else, a Sri Lankan or a Japanese or an Indian, but the core around which the nation's values are formed is the WASP. So she's telling him to his face that you may think you are American, but America is built on WASP values. And it doesn't matter how much you parrot those WASP values, how much you tap dance for us and say everything that we agree with you on, we still cannot vote for you because you're not American. You're not a human being. You're not part of our understanding of what civilization is. You are less than. You are sub. And he
That
had
which
to take
which
it.
is and I don't know if people who are listening, like, I don't know if people know Vivek's background, but some of his educational background. He went to a private high school in Cincinnati where he was born, and then he went to Harvard undergrad and then Yale Law. On the surface, you can't get more WASP than those places, right? Private
Exactly.
school, private school, private school. Harvard undergrad, Yale Law. That is like their bastion of waspiness. And it's insane that she's saying these things to him, telling him basically that it doesn't matter what school he goes to, how much money he makes, how much he bends over backwards to, subjugate his actual beliefs or personality just to fit in. He's never going to fit in. And that's got to be a huge blow to a man who has an ego the size that he has.
Yeah. And, he can put whatever bravado spin he wants to put on it, praising her for having the guts. But everyone who watched that clip could just see the light dying behind his eyes as he went through all of the stuff. But the problem for him is that he has built his entire political career on denying that racism exists, so that when I actually the perfection of her like using anti-blackness and repurposing it for him, I just found that too beautiful, because this is what can happen with other minorities who find themselves trying to subjugate other minorities and thinking that, oh, if I'm anti-black enough, transphobic enough, whatever enough, anti-immigrant enough, the Republican Party would accept me. It's kind of like that gay guy who went to a GOP rally, and the GOP attendants there, the Republican attendants that literally said homophobic slurs to his face. Like, at some point, I hope these people will understand that what Ann Coulter is saying is true. And Ann Coulter is not like, she's supposed to be a mainstream Republican, right? She's not like Carrie Lake. And she is telling y'all that this country
allegedly.
is built, right. And she's stating the most white nationalist position I have ever heard, which is this country is for white Christians. That's what she's saying. This country is for WASP. This country is built on WASP values, and none of you other people count. If you cannot be heteronormative, white, have the classic WASP identity, if you're not born with it, if it's not handed down to you through pedigree, you don't count.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is some of the reaction to this. I saw an opinion piece in a conservative publication that tried to spin this as because Vivek's response after this was posted and went viral. He said, quote, "I disagree with her, but respect she had the guts to speak her mind." Sure, good for you. But people are trying to spin this as him respecting the First Amendment, and will probably say to us, you guys are too woke. That's why you have a problem with this. And I don't agree. I don't think that's the case. Like, this is not about wokeness. It is disrespectful, like on a societal level. Remove woke or DEI or whatever the new bogeyman is on the right this week. It's not about that. This man has done waspy things, let's say. He should be accepted by them if it's not about color, if it's not about background. But she's telling him he's not. And so I don't think it's about First Amendment. It's disrespectful AF, so we don't curse on the podcast. It's rude, it's obnoxious, it's very unnecessary. And I don't know. I just felt like it was just evidence that we need to show to people when those of us on the left tell you that they, on the right, won't accept you as a person of color just because you repeat all their slogans and support them, you know, with loyalty, blind loyalty. It's just, there's no real reward for this, unfortunately.
Yep, you can good ones your way as much as you can. You can try to be their model minority. It's still not enough. That's what Ann Coulter is telling y'all loud and clear. I hope y'all
Yep.
can hear
It's
it.
not enough. It's not enough. And now our last topic today is one that we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but
Yeah.
there's a new movie out, Anne Hathaway and The Idea of You, which I believe started out as Harry Styles fan fiction, which is always a red flag for me. I am sorry. I'm sure it was written well, but I was first traumatized by fan fiction when I learned about Twilight. Not Twilight, I'm sorry, 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fan fiction. Started out as Twilight fan fiction. And so I just, when you tell me something is based on fan fiction, I'm immediately like, no, thank you. So I'm not going to watch this movie. But Olu, you were interested in talking about it because.
Well, I was interested in talking about it because Anne Hathaway is having a moment again. I remember in the 2010s, for some reason, people hated her, and I didn't get it.
When did this happen? I missed that.
Yeah, she had maybe theater geek energy, and she was deemed fake or try hard or whatever. So the 2010s, after she did the Les Miserables film, was not a good period for her in terms of like being popular. But yeah, now, as you said, in this film, which I also haven't seen because, well, it's not really my jam. I'm not really into Anne Hathaway's filmography, but it's out there, and it's I guess sort of a topic du jour because it's actually showing an older, woman in her 40s dating a boy band leader in his 20s. Very reminiscent, I guess, of Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles' relationship. And also, I guess it's refreshing, like ever since the days of old Hollywood where all of this like geriatric men were chasing around beautiful Audrey Hepburn in various European cities. Like we've always had this rom-coms where the man is older and the love interest is a young, ingenue little lady. So I guess this is kind of flipping the script on its head.
Sure. I mean, okay. I'm still not going to watch it, but I hope, I root for the male lead though. I'm really a huge fan of his. I saw him in a terrible Netflix movie called Purple Hearts a couple of years ago, which I've talked about before online, but it was a movie that was called Purple Hearts because it was a conservative dating a liberal. And, that's all I'm going to say. Go look it up on Netflix if you want to watch it. Terrible movie, terrible storyline, but he was a great actor. And I was like, this guy's going places. And I guess Places is this new movie with Anne Hathaway. Although he's in another show that people are really talking about online, Mary and George, which is a historical drama that is also apparently really good. So go see that too. But what I wanted to say about Anne Hathaway.
Right. So you have a beef with her.
Anytime anyone brings up Anne Hathaway, which, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, I always like to tell people that she is on video in a movie from the 2000s singing the N-word.
I was shocked. You literally,
for no reason.
Listeners, I just learned this maybe 18 hours ago, and my jaw dropped to the floor when she told me.
Yes.
I could not believe it.
Go look up the movie. It's a 2005 movie called Havoc, HAVOC. It stars Anne Hathaway, Bijou Phillips, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, yeah, and Channing Tatum. You got to go see it. It's truly a horrendous film, but in the first 10 minutes or first 15 minutes or so, Anne Hathaway sings a song and says the N-word part of the song, and it's 2005. So I think that's recent enough that we should have had good standards for film at that point, and there was no reason for her to do that. They could have chosen another song. It's so awkward and cringe to watch. And I don't think a lot of people saw this movie, but you gotta see it. That's my Anne Hathaway story. Whenever anyone brings her up, I don't hate her for this. I want to say I'm not saying she's racist. That is not any of this. I think she was a young actress who was given a line and she tried her best. So my beef is really with whoever wrote that script because it's a really horrendous script. But you should go watch that movie if you haven't seen it. That's what I'll say.
Exactly. So, you know, I don't want to say in defense of the film or in defense of Anne Hathaway.
Oh, don't defend the film. You can defend Anne Hathaway, but don't defend the
film was trying to do, and maybe what Anne Hathaway was told the film was going to be about, and what made her comfortable with saying this. It is supposed to be. Well, it's not really a satire, but it's supposed to reflect the lives of overprivileged white kids who decide or who end up appropriating gang culture in Los Angeles as a way of, I guess, relieving the ennui and the angst in their lives, as teenagers tend to do. And then they try too hard and at being gangsters, start using the N-word, and then actually get into trouble with the law. And so I think that was the premise of the film. The execution, as you said, is horrendous.
Yes, that's I admire the premise. The execution was terrible, and if you have an hour and a half or so on a Saturday night, there's no movies in theaters, there's no play you want to see, there's no concert you want to go to, you can't hang out at a friend's house, you're out of alcohol. This is a movie to watch. That's what I'll say. So go look it up wherever you stream movies and see if you can find it, because I actually think it's been scrubbed from a lot of places. I love this resurgence of Anne Hathaway because I saw she did interviews. She's been doing interviews. People keep asking her about her past roles. Not one single journalist has been brave enough to ask her about the 2005 movie, let's say, called Havoc. So go watch it if you have time.
Okay. I just want to say that I think you may have rosy colored glasses of what the 2000s were like.
Oh, no. I didn't know. Listen, I know.
Not as. Also that story is really relevant to now. I mean, we continue to have the conversation about cultural appropriation. You see Black kids creating stuff online, and soon it becomes mainstream because white kids adapt it and they're able to monetize it more, and it becomes like they are appropriating what Black kids are coming up with. So I still think it's still relevant today, and it's still something that is happening today.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think it is relevant. I think it is relevant. I want to say I don't have rosy colored glasses of the 2000s. I want to point that out. The other day I saw someone really lamenting streaming, Netflix and Hulu and all that, and complaining about, it was a millennial. They were like, when I was your age, we could put one channel on and watch all the shows for free. And I'm like, but do you remember what was on TV though? I would rather pay $20 a month to Netflix for some of their content than watch, I don't know, Seventh Heaven. What was on TV in the 2000s? I'm really asking. I don't know.
Was it Friday Night Lights? I don't know. Maybe that was 2010s.
Just stuff. And it's we sometimes, as famous lyricist Taylor Swift said, nostalgia isn't, it's not always good, you know,
Oh,
like people
okay.
have rosy colored glasses.
Let's not
We're
do
not going to
that.
talk about Taylor Swift. It's fine. I'm just saying I don't have rosy colored glasses about the 2000s. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it is very cringe. I feel bad for her that that clip exists and that movie exists.
The
I'm pretty
movie
sure.
exists.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure if she could have it scrubbed, she would. It's not a great moment for anybody involved in the film.
It's really not. And like I said, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Channing Tatum, these are people we all know, you know, today. They were
Right.
all very young when this movie came out. I believe it was 2005. So Anne Hathaway would have been 23, so not too young, but young enough in Hollywood. But yeah, I'm sure all of them would love for this movie not to exist, but it does. It went straight. I want to say it went straight to DVD, so don't feel like you missed it in theaters or something. It went straight to DVD, which is again, even the studio was like, "Why are we doing this?" And it was the same year, which I just love. The same year that Brokeback Mountain came out, which obviously Anne Hathaway got a lot of praise for. So just a really interesting year for Anne Hathaway. But we're happy for her today. You know, good for her.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Good for her.
Thank you for joining us this week. We have been Olu and Liz. You may find us wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You may also reach out to us at Liberal Banter on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. We will be back next week. For now, we say goodbye.